Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Weekly Crop, and this week we are talking gimbals, and specifically this guy, the Crane 3 Lab. Now, it wasn't that long ago, probably, I would say like 3 to 4 years ago, that the Zhiyun company and their Crane was seen sort of as an entry-level or an economy version of the DJI Ronin. And they were sort of one of the first handheld gimbals to come out in terms of taking away these big gimbal systems and just putting it sort of as a joystick sort of in your hand. There's been a lot of evolution since, and we all know that the Crane 2 became very, very popular, very similar to the Ronin S, for example. It was one of the first gimbals to allow for a follow focus unit to be put on, and heavier payloads. I think somewhere around like 3.2 kilograms you could now put on the Crane 2. Well, they've really upped their ante when it comes to the Crane 3, and I know that the DJI Ronin S has been a super, super popular gimbal. For a little bit more, you get this guy for about a couple $100 more, and what you get with this is pretty remarkable. So we don't have it outfitted right now with the follow focus and the zoom as well on here, but you can get that package that will put the follow focus unit and another unit for your zoom on here as well. But it doesn't sort of end there, and you can already see that the biggest change to this is the design. It takes sort of a design cue from an airplane joystick, so it allows for this sort of really cool two-handed design that you can use the tripod here. When you're not using it, you just plunk it down, but when you do use it, it becomes a second handle, and you can either use the follow focus wheel here to create focus, plus you've got the joystick back here as well for your pan, tilt, and everything. But you can also run your focus with the trigger up here as well. Now, the biggest frustration I had when it came to a lot of these gimbals, especially the earlier versions of the Crane, was that you really only ever had a joystick, and you had to toggle through the modes by pressing once, press twice, press 3 times, and you never were really sure what mode you're in until you kind of moved the gimbal around, and it was often frustrating. Well, they've removed that whole sort of confusion now because they've put all your mode buttons on the side so you can switch between modes, and then an additional sort of mode in the front here with lock, and then sort of full mode. And then there's an additional sort of go mode back here for sport mode, if you will. So all your mode choices and all the ways that the gimbal works is now all in separate buttons, which makes it a lot faster. Now, the second thing that's really frustrated me over the years with gimbals is that anytime you want to operate your camera, you're often, having to move around all the motors and arms to get in there and hit record, or, change your ISO settings and all these types of things. It becomes infinitely a lot more difficult. Well, again, another solution they've provided is through this controller box here, you now can control your 3 points of exposure. So your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture all on the back here. There's also a wireless transmitter. So this wireless transmitter will go into your HDMI port, and then with your phone and the app, you can now wirelessly control both the gimbal itself and use it as a monitor, which is amazing. And then you can stream as a result. So if you can stream to Instagram or Facebook Live or anything like that through your phone, well, then you can stream live as it happens, which is kind of neat. So those are like the big upgrades for me. What has always been really great about this gimbal is the fact that the batteries always lasted really long. Now, I actually own the Crane 1, the very first version, and I've never gotten to a shoot where I've burned through a full round of batteries. It comes with 2 sets of batteries, and it always blew me away how long they lasted. Well, this will come with 3 batteries, and they last for 7.5 hours, is what I'm told. But what's really great about it, what I really love, is how easy the batteries are to take out and put back in. So if you're going to do a battery change, typically what you'd have to do with a lot of gimbals is you have to unscrew it, or like futz with a bit of a plate system. This one has got a nice lock, and it just immediately pops off really easily and then pops back on just like that. Nice and secure. So super fast. Really love that about this design as well. So the question I first had when I first saw this gimbal was, how stable is it? And of course, we all know it's going to be very stable and quite good at stability. That's the whole point of it. But I just was a little bit skeptical of this system. I thought that this might be a bit awkward, and I'm used to more of the crossbar system. To me, the wider your hands are away from the actual camera itself, the more stable it's going to be. So I felt like this was still too janky. So I wanted to test that out. I wanted to see how well this fared when I walked with it versus how stable was it when I ran with it. That's always the real judgment, is like, how janky is the image when you start actually running? So my colleague Woody and I stepped outside with it and did those tests. We just kind of did some walking and some tracking shots and then some running shots. And I was quite surprised at how stable it was when I ran. I know that with a lot of the other gimbals I've used, it didn't feel as stable as this when I started running. So for me, whether I was holding it like this when I was running, whether I was holding it like this when I was running, or whether I had two hands, it was remarkably stable. So for me, this thing's a little over $1,000 Canadian. I think it's very, very much well worth it. I think it actually takes the place of a lot of other gimbals, and I'll tell you why. Because what the Crane 3 does is it actually replaces a lot of even larger gimbals, potentially, depending on how you use your gimbal. This may not apply, but as I mentioned, the Crane 2 was somewhere around 3.2 kilograms in payload. Well, this goes up to 4.5 approximately, so that's like 10 pounds of payload that you can put on this. And because this recessed back motor is here, it allows you to put on a much larger system. So first things that come to mind, of course, are the Sony FS5 and the Canon C200. So if you strip those guys down, they're going to live on here. Now, of course, if you add mics and everything to that, that's going to be a pretty heavy package. So doing this for a really long time is going to get quite exhausting. But there are some other options in terms of rigging around that will help you with that. And so it's not sort of the end all be all, but it is a really great system if you're going from some fairly moderate to light systems like this with, we've got the A7 III on here. Now, this is sort of the big brother to another Zhiyun product that you may be familiar with, which is the Weeble, and that's sort of like the one that was sort of made for these A6500 or the sort of A7 products with a lighter sort of kit lens. But once we get a little bit heavier, then this is the guy to give it to you, because it takes such a great range. And the last thing that I really love about it, this is again another trade-off, another design that was borrowed from larger gimbals, which is a lock. So when you are balancing your gimbal, it's really nice to be able to lock off each individual motor axis so that you can just deal with the one axis that you're trying to balance and then lock that and then go to the next one. So it's a lot faster in terms of being able to balance your gimbal. So in closing, what I really love about this is it is a small handheld gimbal system that is really a borderline pro model. It takes all the advantages of these larger pro gimbals and brings them into a small handheld unit that takes a wide variety of camera weights and sizes. It basically gives you no excuses. There's no excuses anymore. You can't say, well, my gimbal doesn't do this, because this gimbal does it. And that's why it's so popular. And Zhiyun is now becoming a big leader in the gimbal technology game because of things like this that they're really developing. So if you guys have any more questions about this gimbal, and in fact any other gimbal, because we have the widest range of gimbals I know of in Canada for sure. We sell basically every gimbal on the market. If you want to talk to one of our gimbal experts or find out anything more, please visit us at vistek.ca, visit us in one of our stores here in Canada, or call us. We'd be happy to chat with you. That's all for now, guys. Have some fun out there and happy shooting. What do you